Top 30 vampire movies of all time. Humanity has been obsessed with the concept of eternal living, and if you sit to think since when, well, for most of eternity. But it is not just the immortality of vampires that fascinates us, it is also their capacity to observe humanity from a distance while it made technological advancements or went to wars. Vampires can live up and down in society and even live parallel and sideways. Then they have superpowers like shapeshifting, levitation, the power of not casting a reflection in a mirror, something which tells us that they leave no trace. Although vampires gained popularity in medieval Europe, they have existed in some form or another in every mythology and in every time period. For instance, in Indian literature, we have the Katha Sarit Sagara from the 11th century, which depicts King Vikram Aditya's quests with the nightly beings. Likewise, there are traces of vampiric entities in African and Central Asian mythologies and literature from as early as the 6th century. And naturally, if there are films about creatures who live eternally, those films will have a massive fan base. Since the time films started depicting vampires, writers and directors have started to give them a rather sexy and appealing viewpoint as creatures who live as nocturnal beasts and go to any lengths to ensure their identity is kept hidden, much like a spy. F.W. Murnau, which made the classic vampire film Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror starring Max Schreck in 1922, and since then, there have been a plethora of vampire films, not just in the Western world, but other nations as well, spanning from Iran to China. While few movies focused on a single vampire and their life pursuits of hunting and killing, the others seem to diversify the subgenre. While the film Blade pitted a half vampire against a vampire, Underworld seemed to make vampires duel with primitive werewolves, but then there are comedy films like What We Do in the Shadows that paint vampires in humorous colors. And yet, there are films like Let Me In and Only Lovers Left Alive that are a more elaborate examination of a vampire's eternal life. In this video, we have compiled a list of the 30 greatest vampire films that are not bound by limitations of time and boundaries. So dim the lights and pull your blankets because this one is going to bite, and bite very hard. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. The Lost Boys, 1987.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till
After their mother Lucy's divorce, Michael and his younger brother Sam move with her to live with Lucy's father. They come to the small beach town of Santa Carla in California. From the beginning of the film, we are given subtle hints that something is wrong with Santa Carla. From flyers of missing people to self-proclaimed vampire hunters, the town has everything that a vampire film needs. Soon Lucy gets a job at Max Lawrence's video store while the kids begin to learn about the town and its mysterious citizens. It wasn't before long that Michael met an attractive woman named Star and the two of them hit it off. But all wouldn't be as well as Michael expected because, through Star, he meets David, the leader of a biking gang who is a vampire. David inducts Michael into the gang and turns him into a half-vampire, and for Michael to turn completely into a vampire, he will need to make a kill. But Michael doesn't want that. The only way he could return to his human form is by killing the leader of the vampires, who is someone he knows very well. Will he succeed in turning human again, or has Michael's fate been sealed forever? Director Joel Schumacher gave a supremely watchable example of something that the 80s did right with horror. Half horror and half comedy, The Lost Boys blends teenage culture with some good 80s horror to bring out a briskly entertaining film. The film also had a cultural impact of sorts and is an inspiration behind shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But one of the more impressive aspects of the film was Kiefer Sutherland's character as David Powers. The contemporary audience might know Sutherland as the designated survivor and president of the United States, but he very well used to be an iconic villain who inspired the depiction of vampires in style and strong personality.
Louis, put me in my coffin. Put me in my coffin.
I'll put you in your coffin!
Number 2. Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Chronicles, 1994. The film stars Tom Cruise as Lestat and Brad Pitt as Louis in lead roles in this epic vampire flick. Louis used to be a rich plantation owner in his human life, but after the death of his child and wife, he became a drunken recluse who had lost interest in life. On a fateful night, he gets attacked by Lestat, who sensed Louis's condition and offered him a chance to transform into a vampire. Louis agreed to the transformation, but it wasn't before long that he started regretting it. While Lestat lives to kill and kills to live, Louis resists his temptations of hunting humans for blood and lives only on animal blood. Things take a drastic turn for Lestat and Louis when Lestat turns a young girl named Claudia, who Louis sees as his daughter, but Lestat sees as a ruthless killer. So against the backdrop of a dark and morose San Francisco, Louis recounts his epic crusade spanning almost 2 centuries to a skeptic reporter named Daniel Malloy. He tells this unbelievable story of a life worse than death, a life filled with infinite love, unforgiving betrayals, eternal hunger, and extreme loneliness. But is this epic ode to submission to bloodshed really an interview with a vampire? When the cast includes the likes of Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, and Kirsten Dunst, you know that you are in for a masterpiece.
Should we burn him? Bury him? What would he have liked, Louis?
The film is equal parts melancholic, terrorizing, and bold. Naturally, the audience gets too much of good stuff to sink their teeth into and revel in the beauty of some good old gothic horror. While Interview with a Vampire received Oscar nominations for Best Art Direction and Best Original Score, Kirsten Dunst was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress. We highly recommend you watch this one if you haven't yet, because this Neil Jordan film is imaginatively, ghastly, and mesmerizingly compelling, to say the least. Number 3. Let the Right One In, 2008. The story is set in 1982 in the Blackburg suburb of Stockholm, where a meek 12-year-old boy named Oscar lived with his mother, Yvonne. Oscar is often bullied by his classmates at school, but he cannot do much apart from imagining in what ways he would hurt them or even kill them. One night in the apartment's playground, Oscar chances upon Ellie, a girl his age who had recently moved in with a man named Hacken. Ellie warns him that she is not a girl and that they cannot be friends, but young Oscar is determined to taste love for the first time, and naturally, he doesn't pay heed to the grand red flags that Ellie gives off. In reality, Ellie is a vampire who's grown psychologically but looks like a little girl. Hacken makes the killings for her and collects human blood in milk cartons so that Ellie herself doesn't have to make the kills. As fate would have it, Hacken makes a grave mistake, and it only results in Ellie being left alone to fend for herself. As she helps Oscar with his issues, the two of them form bonds on romantic levels. In the end, the film asks one simple question: how much can love forgive? Kari Hedebrandt as Oscar and Lena Leandersson as Ellie gave strikingly efficient performances in this Swedish horror romance directed by Thomas Alfredson. Let the Right One In is living proof that the best of fairy tales are the darkest in nature. The film blends crime, drama, and fantasy in a coolly balanced and warmly satisfying way as it explores the nuances of young love and alienation. The one lesson that it will teach you is that being human and acting like one are definitely two very different things. Throughout the film's runtime, you would be thrown into a pit of fright and suspense, but the very next scene would lift you with the bond that young Oscar and Ellie share. We recommend this one if you are in the mood to understand how sweet yet disturbing young love can get, how the human mind works when faced with complex questions that have no right answer. Number 4. Blade, 1998. Blade is the story of a vampire hunter who is a hybrid of humans and vampires. He was still in his mother's womb when a vampire attacked her. Although the doctors managed to save Blade, his mother succumbed to her injuries. 30 years later, Blade has become a prolific vampire hunter who has all the powers of vampires but none of their weaknesses like sunlight and silver. However, he does need human blood to live. Blade soon finds himself in the midst of an elaborate conspiracy because a vampire named Deacon Frost has overthrown the Council of Pureblood Vampires and seeks to carry out an ancient ritual from the pages of the Vampire Bible that would awaken the blood god La Magra. Furthermore, Blade's blood is the key to this diabolic ritual. If Blade is to save humanity from this imminent evil, he will have to take on Deacon Frost and his henchmen. But is one man enough to fight an entire army of vampires? Writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan created the character of Blade in 1973 for Marvel Comics. He initially appeared as a supporting character in the comic titled The Tomb of Dracula. When Stephen Norrington directed the film in 1998, he transformed and upgraded the titular character to cater to the 90s audience. Wesley Snipes' in and his Blade makes the film worthwhile because he understands that the character he is playing is more than a cool martial artist in a leather suit. He gracefully portrayed a superhero, but never failed to depict that his character was vulnerable to various threats, yet made his way through the thick and thin by using his skills and wits. While fans and critics are divided in their opinion, Blade certainly is a blast of entertainment surely because of the raw and well choreographed action sequences, gratuitous levels of violence, and creative cinematography. It's a must-watch for all horror fans and a solid recommendation for movie buffs in general. Number 5. Nosferatu the Vampyre, 1979. When estate agent Jonathan Harker is asked to go to Transylvania to see that a lucrative deal is signed with Count Dracula, he leaves his beautiful and pure-hearted wife Lucy at Wismar. The deal is crucial for Jonathan's career, and he makes a week-long arduous journey to reach Count Dracula's castle. On his way, he stops at a village inn where people warned him about Dracula and his vampiric nature, but being a skeptic, Jonathan didn't believe them and went anyway. Upon reaching the castle, he met Dracula, who had long fingernails, sharp teeth, pale skin, and a rodent-like appearance. Somehow Dracula caught a glimpse of Lucy's portrait and got enchanted by her appearance. He immediately agreed to purchase the property in Wismar, but to Jonathan's horror and shock, he discovered that the villagers were speaking the truth and Dracula was indeed a vampire. That night Dracula left for Wismar and imprisoned Jonathan in the castle. Jonathan will have to free himself and reach Wismar in time to save Lucy. But will he? Meanwhile, Lucy learns about the diabolic Count's weakness. Although the film will most certainly scare the holy daylight out of you, confining the film's scope to horror or vampire flick would be criminal and highly understated. Nosferatu the Vampyre not only packs great horror sequences and a rich story, but has all the necessary ingredients to make it a great drama as well. Director Werner Herzog created a film that explains and examines the dreadful things that befall the unwary and uncautious. The film is essentially considered to be a stylistic remake of F.W. Murnau's 1922 masterpiece Nosferatu, but Herzog's film has its own distinct point of view of Count Dracula and his personality. With some really great pieces of acting from the likes of Klaus Kinski, Isabelle Adjani, and Bruno Ganz, Nosferatu the Vampyre finds its way on any list that compiles top horror films of all time. Watch it to know it. Number 6. Near Dark, 1987. On one fateful night, a young man named Caleb Colton chanced upon a beautiful drifter named May.
Have a bite?
Bite?
Just dying for a cone.
It was about to be morning, and Caleb didn't have any reason to believe that any harm would come from giving her a lift. But oh boy, he was in for some real trouble. Just as she is about to leave, he asks her for a kiss, but May gives him more than that and bites him before fleeing. Later, Caleb started to go through unexpected changes. For instance, sunlight began to hurt and burn his skin. Caleb realized the real meaning of the bite that he had received. Later that day, Sarah and Loy Colton, Caleb's sister, and his father witness him getting abducted by a group of people. This group of men and women was May's vampire family that was led by a centuries-old vampire named Jesse, who was played by Lance Henriksen. Because they thought that Caleb was a human, everyone in the group wished him dead, but May saved his life by revealing that she had turned him. But to prove his loyalty to them, he will have to kill, an idea that he cannot sink his teeth into. Just as he was beginning to get accustomed to his new lifestyle, Sarah and Loy show up. Caleb will now have to make a few difficult choices and choose if he wishes to stay with his human family or his vampire girlfriend May. Director Catherine Bigelow delivered a masterpiece, which is a horror film, a western, and a romance all at the same time. But above all, it was a reminder of the foul things that happen to youth who embrace the dictatorship of addiction, infection, and drugs. On James Cameron's advice, she borrowed the ensemble cast, from his 1986 super hit film Aliens, which is why we get to see Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, and Jeanette Goldstein in Near Dark. Catherine is known for films like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. Her filmmaking expertise is visible in the way she paints savagery and violence in gorgeous but melancholic colors. Human emotions have always been her forte, and this vampire western explores diverse themes like love and seductiveness of evil. If you wish to go for a modern take on vampire lore and literature, then Near Dark is a scary poetry that will leave a mark in your heart. Oh, and by the way, despite being a vampire film, it never mentions the word vampire. Number 7. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992. Drunk with power of victory over the innumerable hordes of the Ottoman Empire, Vlad Dracula, the near-invincible Romanian monarch and the national hero, returns home only to taste impossible suffering because of his wife's suicide. The insurmountable personal loss made Vlad Dracula give up his faith, and so began his downward trajectory as nature's most vicious abomination. When the eccentric and successful solicitor Jonathan Harker reached Transylvania in 1897 for a business trip, the vampiric aristocrat chanced upon a portrait of Harker's fiancée, Mina Murray, who Count Dracula thinks is the reincarnation of his late wife. While Jonathan is kept prisoner at Dracula's impregnable castle with his brides, Dracula himself leaves for London to take what he thinks is his. But all is not lost because the prolific vampire hunter Professor Abraham Van Helsing will leave no stone unturned to stop the menace. So, 4 centuries later, Dracula's unquenched bloodlust and hunger for a reunion with his long-dead wife have brought him to London. Once upon a time, he embraced damnation and chose to walk eternally among the living because of love. Will it be love that would put a final end to Dracula? Produced and directed by Francis Ford Coppola, the film has a starry cast, including the likes of Gary Oldman as Dracula, Winona Ryder as Mina, Anthony Hopkins as Abraham Van Helsing, and Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker. Coppola ensured that the film remained grounded in the source material, i.e. Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. And naturally, the film serves as a feel like taking a walk down the streets plagued with sinister darkness, a darkness that's caused because of the eerie shadow of Count Dracula himself. While a few critics have labeled the film as a lost opportunity, it will forever find a rank in any list that compiles top vampire films of all times.
My God, that is good. I want more.
No, you've had more than enough. This is pure shit.
Number 8. Only Lovers Left Alive, 2013. As the world deteriorates due to the wrong decisions humanity has taken over the past few centuries, a depressed musician and age-old vampire, Adam, spends his days sleeping and night in gloom and depression. He has started to lose the will to carry on, but tries to find some solace in his musical instruments and books in his Victorian home in Michigan. Clearly he doesn't kill for human blood, but instead poses as Dr. Faust to purchase his most favorite O-negative blood from Dr. Watson from a nearby hospital.
By the way, that stethoscope of yours is...
When Adam's centuries-old eccentric and enigmatic wife Eve learns that something is up with Adam, she flies down from Morocco to take care of the situation. Eve implores him to see all the good in the world and do away with his despair. And for a moment, it seemed that Adam was about to give up his despair, but then came Eve's younger sister, Ava, the reckless vampire who would destroy the quiet and almost peaceful world that Adam and Eve had built for themselves.
Hey? Yeah, but I'm really, really, really hungry.
But is love bound by places, or is it built with people? That's all the film tries to answer. The story of Only Lovers Left Alive feels like a breath of fresh air at a time when horror films have become repetitive and naive. Tilda Swinton as Eve and Tom Hiddleston as Adam wear the shoes of a wife and husband whose marriage has been going on for untold centuries. They're a couple who have seen humanity's unyielding degradation and demise, so they're left to eternally live in a place that they loathe but have nowhere else that they could call home. While most vampire films tell us how the blood-sucking abominations use their powers to slay humans, writer and director Jim Jarmusch showed us the grim side of living eternally. Although their ages have not been mentioned in the film, Jarmusch once said that Eve was 2,000 years old while Adam was 500 years old. We would say that it is an offbeat and frequently funny flick that makes intelligent use of music, photography, and production design to enhance its quality. And if nothing else, watch it for the wonderful chemistry between the Ancient One and Loki. Did you know that it was ranked the 4th best film of the 2010s by The Hollywood Reporter? Number 9. From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996. Bank robbers and fugitive brothers Richie and Seth Gecko are hiding in a motel with a hostage. When Seth returns after getting supper, he finds that Richie had assaulted and murdered the clerk.
You stop it! What the fuck is your problem? God damn!
But to their fortune, an ex-pastor named Jacob Fuller with lost faith arrives at the motel with his teenage children Kate and Scott. The Geckos abduct them so that they could help the brothers cross the Mexican border. In Mexico, they visit a strip club in the middle of nowhere where the Geckos were supposed to meet Carlos at dawn, a man who would help them get sanctuary. Things go south when they learn that the employees of the seedy bar are all vampires. The survivors will have to fend off the large assembly of vampires if they wish to stay alive, but it is going to be a long, fateful night for all of them. Written by Quentin Tarantino and directed by Robert Rodriguez, From Dusk Till Dawn is a super fun vampire flick, even if it may not quite qualify as great art. Starring as the notorious and hateable Richie Gecko, Quentin Tarantino shares excellent on-screen chemistry with George Clooney, who stars as Richie's brother Seth Gecko. As for the film itself, it has Salma Hayek's hotness spilled all over the place, and if that doesn't satisfy your cold heart, Rodriguez and Tarantino bring you swarms of vampires in the shape of bats, a few high-octane action sequences, mutated rat-like beasts, and well, a lot of blood and bullets. Simply Old Testament. Interestingly enough, as much as it is a film about vampires and beasts, it is also a tale of familial relationships and bonds that strangers form when faced with an unforeseen calamity. Number 10. Chronos, 1993. In 1536, an alchemist invented something called the Chronos that could provide its owner with eternal life. But like vampires, they would be forced to sustain themselves on human blood. 4 centuries later, in 1937, the building where the alchemist resided collapsed, and the man died after his heart got pierced in the accident. When the investigators reached the spot, they were shocked to see basins filled with blood. 59 years later, in 1996, a rather religious antique trader named Jesus Gris finds the object with an archangel statue. The device grew spider legs, gripped Jesus, and inserted a mysterious solution into his body. Following this, Jesus' vigor and vitality started to come back, and so did his youth. But as was expected, he also developed a lust for blood. Meanwhile, a rich but ailing businessman named Dieter de la Guardia has known about the Chronos for quite some time and has been spending money like water to retrieve it by any means necessary. Guardia appoints his nephew Angel to retrieve the device from Jesus, who has started to have issues with his new physical state. Destroying the device would kill him, and handing it to Guardia would mean it falls into the wrong hands. Written and directed by the legendary Academy Award-winning master of monsters Guillermo del Toro, this film is not a random vampire flick that deals with religious imagery, mythology, and horror, but a creative piece of filmmaking that ignores the notions set by mainstream commercial films. If you even have a passing knowledge of Del Toro, then you'd know that he relies heavily on practical effects, and naturally, Chronos is visually rich, emotionally compelling, and creatively brilliant, with a story that's equal parts emotional and dark. As for the basic theme, it's a brave variation of vampirism and certainly offbeat, but in a stylish and intelligent way because it tells a gothic horror tale from a relatively modern angle. The cherry on the cake would be the fine pieces of acting by Federico Lupi as Jesus Gris and Ron Perlman as Angel de la Guardia. You can check out more of Guillermo del Toro's amazing work in our video titled 10 Insanely Disturbing Creatures of Guillermo del Toro, Explained Maestro of Nightmarish Creatures. Number 11. Fright Night, 1985. For the teenage and thrill-seeking Charlie Brewster, nothing is as good as watching a horror show called Fright Night on TV. Strangely enough, the show is hosted by a one-time vampire hunter, Peter Vincent. As fate would have it, Charlie discovered one night that his neighbor Jerry Dandridge is a vampire responsible for various unsolved murders and disappearances in the neighborhood. He immediately seeks the help of his girlfriend Amy Peterson and his friend Evil Ed. But Charlie is a smart kid, so he calls the authorities before doing anything foolish. But then, when Detective Lennox and Charlie visit Jerry's house, they only find his so-called roommate, who tells them that Jerry is always away.
Well, obviously the boys made a mistake, obviously, not a kid.
A coffin! That's what's down there, a coffin. I saw them carry it in.
Naturally, Detective Lennox wasn't thrilled, assuming he was on a wild goose chase with a horror-obsessed teen. When Charlie's mother invites Jerry into their house, Charlie knows that no one is safe until Jerry is destroyed. So what will little Jerry do?
Soon.
His only hope lies with Peter Vincent, but it seems he has lost faith in himself and his skills. What makes director Tom Holland's Fright Night such a fun film to watch even after all these years, and his expertise in putting in layers of humor and suspense and then coating the entire cake with a layer of horror? The cherry on the cake remains the impeccable acting by the leads, who knew exactly what they were doing and were expected to do. Fright Night has become a sort of minor classic in the genre. The film used over $1 million to create the special effects, and it was the first vampire film of the period to spend that kind of money on special effects. Having said that, Holland ensured that good acting and the warmth of relationships and emotions were not sacrificed in favor of special effects.
Sarah, what have you done to me? There's some alien strain consuming my blood.
Number 12. The Hunger, 1983. Miriam Blaylock was an age-old vampire who had been promising young men eternal life upon transformation into a vampire, and all she wanted in return was some love. Not a bad deal, eh? But, well, there's a catch. Miriam does promise eternal life to unsuspecting men, but that's a half-truth because she doesn't promise eternal youth. After she is done with them, the men age rapidly, and within days they turn hundreds of years old, weak and fragile, living eternally in a frail body. Miriam's current partner is John Blaylock, a cellist she met in the 18th century. The Blaylocks live in a beautiful apartment and pose as musicians who teach classical music. But as fate would have it, he too started to undergo rapid aging and soon turned to scientist Dr. Sarah Roberts, who was researching the role of blood and the aging of humans. Sarah initially ignores John, but after seeing how much he has aged in a few hours that he had been waiting for her, she takes up his case. But John's youthful life has ended, and Sarah places him in a coffin in the attic, and around John's coffin are several other coffins of the men who once fell for Miriam's traps.
Be kind to him tonight.
When Sarah comes to the Blaylock house looking for John, she finds Miriam and the two end up making out. Is Sarah Miriam's next love, who would ultimately be doomed to live in an eternal living death? How many vampire films have you watched that were rich in style and involved a bloody love triangle and lesbianism? Tony Scott's The Hunger is one such film, and it's a love triangle that none want to be a part of. Back in the 80s, when exploitation films and unreasonable gore was every horror hound's bread and butter, The Hunger felt like a breath of fresh air, a piece of work that distinguished between gore and fear. This erotic horror film is based on Whitley Strieber's novel of the same name, but drifts away in many places. While it cannot be said that Tony Scott has the same directorial capabilities as his brother Ridley Scott, one cannot either deny that The Hunger is a luxurious feast that would take care of your visual appetite, if you know what I mean. 13. 30 Days of Night, 2007. Every year, the small town of Barrow in Alaska experiences a polar night that extends for almost a month, and hence the name 30 Days of Night. So most of the people living in the town go to other places, as it is difficult to sustain 30 days without sunlight. On the day of the last sunset, Barrow Sheriff Eben Ollison and his deputy Billy Kitka find damaged cell phones spread across a road, and soon they receive reports of slaughtered sled dogs. Later, Sheriff Ollison finds that the operator of the cell tower had also been killed.
Yeah,
This was a premeditative and calculative attempt to cut off the communication system of the town from the rest of the world. When Ollison caught the culprit behind these happenings, the man told Ollison that they are coming and the locals will be dead.
They're coming.
And before long, the town of Barrow found itself under siege by a band of bloodthirsty vampires who had free reign because there was not going to be any sunlight for the next 30 days. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sheriff Olesen hides in an attic and waits for the long night to end, along with his estranged wife, his brother, and a few other survivors. What 28 Days Later is for zombie films, 30 Days of Night is for vampire films. David Slade picked up age-old monsters and painted them with modern colors, and the result was a novel view of vicious vampires. Even without the long polar nights, the world today is engulfed in other sorts of darkness. David Slade used this fact to turn his piece into a flick that focuses on a bunch of vampires devouring their Alaskan buffet, as well as an estranged couple that seeks to form a bond under duress. Although the film loses much of its teeth as it approaches climax, and the vampirism seems to get frostbite, 30 Days of Night shall be applauded and appreciated for its fresh concept. Number 14, Thirst, 2009. Sang Hyun is an ardent Catholic priest who is not just religious, but also a man who serves society in whichever way he can. In line with this notion of simple living and high thinking, he volunteers to participate in vaccine trials for a deadly virus. However, the experiment goes awry and he dies. But after receiving a blood transfusion, he comes back to life and experiences rapid recovery. Already respected for his dedicated service and unwavering faith, his followers start flocking to him in thousands, believing that he had a gift for healing. Among the people who had come to him was his old friend Kang Woo and his wife Tae-ju, for whom Sang Hyun started developing physical attraction. Soon, Sang Hyun learns that the transfused blood had come from a vampire, and he developed a thirst for blood and physical intimacy. It wasn't before long that Tae-ju told Sang Hyun that her husband assaulted her regularly, and the two of them kill Kang Woo. Furthermore, Sang Hyun converts Tae-ju. Things take a nasty turn from here, as Sang Hyun will have to make some tough choices between desire and righteousness. Loosely based on Emile Zola's 1867 novel Therese Rakin, director Park Chan-wook has delivered a funny yet bloody daring piece of melodrama that remains a vampire film at its core, but has shades of intellectual seriousness, passion, and irony. Park Chan is the guy who brought Korean cinema into the map, and Thirst is just another one of his masterpieces. The film graciously picks up the pace throughout the runtime, and in the end, it leaves the viewers contemplating as the credits start to roll. It starts off as being a spiritual experiment, then successively changes shades to portray body horror, twisted sex, and culminates in a wild sense of poetic justice. Filled with dark humor and themes of sin and obsession, Thirst will quench every vampire lover's thirst. Highly recommended. Number 15, Underworld, 2003. For centuries, the aristocratic and sophisticated vampires have been in a state of war with the brutish and barbaric lichens, an ancient species of werewolves who prowl the city's underworld. Amidst all this, a femme fatale vampire death dealer named Celine takes up the task of eradicating the last of the lichens, who are all but scattered in clusters. But when she learns that the lichens are after a regular human doctor named Michael Corvin, she realizes that not all vampires are fighting for the right cause. And as for Corvin, he is the key that can end the ancient war between the two species. But no vampire elder wishes to believe a young death dealer. Celine and Michael get caught in a fight between the two species, and she must quickly decide where her allegiance lies. Will she break protocol to save her kind? Directed by Len Wiseman, Underworld was something of a turning point in the way vampire films were made and viewed. Apart from making his cast grow out of the possibility of turning into cartoonish characters, Wiseman ensured that his film was visually satisfying and rich. For the same money that you paid for watching a vampire film, you get werewolves as well. And well, they're fighting a real war. Isn't that any action horror fan's wet dream? Yes, there's an emotional angle here, much like the Twilight Saga, but the complexities of the relationship that the characters share are far more serious in nature than Twilight. Furthermore, the fight sequences do ample justice to a war between werewolves and vampires. Maybe Underworld doesn't necessarily succeed in being a critically acclaimed film, but fans of vampires in particular and horror, in general, give the film its due credit. Number 16. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, 2014. The Iranian film opens in a huge wasteland only known as Bad City. The multitudes of oil drilling machines give it a feeling that Bad City is on its way to become a ghost town. In this setup lives a hard-working but unfortunate teenager named Arash, who is not just lonely, but also has to take care of his heroin addict father, who owes money to a drug dealer and pimp named Saeed. To make ends meet, Arash works as a gardener for a wealthy family, but when Saeed seizes his car as repayment for his father's loan, Arash resorts to stealing. When he goes to meet Saeed to give the diamonds in return for his car, he finds that Saeed has been brutally murdered. Arash takes his car along with bags full of drugs and cash. He then goes to a club to sell his drugs, only to later meet a girl. Unbeknownst to Arash, the girl is a vampire who saved the poor and oppressed women and children of Bad City by slaying the oppressors. As Arash and the girl start to develop feelings for each other, they find themselves at psychological crossroads. What will they do? Anna Lily Amirpour's film asks what happens when a good girl obsessed with killing bad guys meets a good guy. Does she love him, or does she find a new perspective of looking at things? This ultra-modern love story of a vampire was shot in a stylishly expressionistic black and white way with slow direction. It most certainly gives a different view and interpretation of the vampire genre that's almost always seen as the domain of teens and action horror lovers. Amirpour's intelligent direction keeps on building and sinking its teeth in the relatable human emotions like loneliness and dread, but not once does it feel like anything we've seen before. It's really surprising to see how international cinema is acing the predominantly European vampires, and that too in style and ease. If it is emotions and atmosphere that you're looking for in your next vampire flick, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is the obvious way to go. Number 17. Vampireís Kiss, 1988. Peter Lowe is a successful literary agent whose life only means alcohol, drugs, one-night stands, during the nights and during the day. The pursuit of money and recognition drives him forward. Naturally, he faces tremendous difficulties in his interpersonal relationships and slowly walks towards craziness. Seeing that he doesn't have many choices to exploit, he starts consulting with a psychiatrist about his mental condition. During one of his casual encounters, Lowe meets Rachel, who turns out to be a vampire. While making out that night, she pins him down and bites his neck. Upon waking up the next morning, Lowe starts to feel that his transformation is inevitable. He starts to sleep under an overturned couch for a coffin, eats bugs, and his eyes apparently get hurt by sunlight, while crosses make him cringe. Furthermore, when he assaults his secretary, she shoots him, but her gun is loaded only with blanks. Having survived the apparent gunshots, Lowe gets convinced that he's indeed a vampire, and he keeps seeing Rachel during the ordeal. But all is not as it seems, because the film splits into two parts, and the line between his fantasy and reality starts to blur. As time passes, Lowe becomes more violent and hostile. Whether it's his hallucinations or vampirism, we'll let you find that out. Directed by Robert Bierman, Vampireís Kiss was a box office failure and was bashed by critics left, right, and center. Yet many of them recommended the film for one simple reason: the performance of Nicolas Cage as Peter Lowe. Even if it felt that the writer and the director didn't necessarily know what they were doing, Cage understood his character and efficiently played the role of a delusional man who may or may not be a vampire. So basically, even if you don't like the film as such, you'd be thrilled with Cage and watch him in awe. You'd be fascinated to know that Nicolas Cage ate a real cockroach for the film, a scene that took him 3 takes to perfect. Number 18. Shadow of the Vampire, 2000. This film is about the making of the 1922 classic silent vampire flick Nosferatu une Symphonie de Grounds, or Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror. It is said that the production of the original film faced several issues and strange events, such as the disappearance and death of several crew members. It is often speculated by some that Max Schreck, the man who played the lead, was indeed a vampire because there's no other reason why he could be so good at playing the part. However, Max Schreck was a skilled method actor who remained in character when he was on set. The film Shadow of the Vampire focuses on the troubled relationship between Nosferatu's director, F.W. Murnau, and Max Schreck. The film tells that Schreck was indeed a vampire, and Murnau had cast him because he was obsessed with making the perfect vampire film. With all the living souls in his vicinity, Schreck was in the middle of a feast, and he started taking advantage of the situation, hurting and killing the crew members. It was now up to Murnau to choose between completing his dream film and stopping Schreck from feeding on people. Produced by Nicolas Cage and directed by E. Elias Marij, the film is a long, resonant, marvelous joke on method acting, ruthless directors, and the effect of cinema as a whole. Although this is a movie about a vampire movie, Marij turned a rather dubious concept into an enjoyable ode to horror and drama. Willem Dafoe, who stars as a member of the undead tribe, is so proficient in his work that when real footage from the original silent classic is sometimes slipped into Marij's film, one fails to notice the difference. If we come to think of it, is it really possible that Max Schreck didn't have any vampiric tendencies, if not a real vampire? I mean, several directors have chosen actors who are in real life exactly what they play in real life. A highly commendable example of this trait would be the little deaf and mute girl Kaylee Hoddle, who played Gia in the 2021 film Godzilla vs. Kong.
Guys, let's go, come on!
Number 19. What We Do in the Shadows. In 2013, a camera crew gained access to the highly secretive society, and they were granted protection by the subjects of the film. And who are these subjects? 3 vampires in a flat living as roommates. Taika Waititi as Viago is a 37-year-old vampire who is more uptight than even Bruce Wayne. Vladislav the Poker is 862 years old, and he is clearly the wannabe Lord Byron or maybe Gary Oldman's Dracula, only funnier. Deacon, on the other hand, is the young rebel of the group who revels in erotic dancing, knitting, and well, being cool. But there's also a 4th vampire, the 8,000 years old Peter, who prefers living inside a stone coffin as a recluse with animalistic or Nosferatu-like traits. When these characters turn their latest victim into a vampire and accept him as the 5th roommate, he brings in his Stu, a computer analyst who introduces the ancient vampires to modern technology. And they learn for the first time what it is like to hit the most popular clubs and bars of Wellington, New Zealand. But things cannot remain smooth forever, can they? Well, did you ever think what issues would come up if you were an eternally undead being living with roommates? Irrespective of your answer to that question, you need to watch this one because it is the Shaun of the Dead of vampire flicks. As these vampires try to get through life's everyday obstacles like paying rent, trying to get into clubs, dealing with flatmate fights, they learn that sunlight and silver are not their real enemies. Directed by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, the film is a laugh riot loaded with humor and puns in every other scene. Warm as freshly sucked blood and sharp as a vampire's fangs, What We Do in the Shadows is like that little movie that you discover by chance and thank your stars because you have found something truly special. Watch this one with a few chilled beers and you'll thank us later. Number 20. Night Watch, 2004. Since the beginning of time, a race of superhuman beings called the Others have walked the face of the earth along with humans. Like all sapient beings, the Others are divided into the forces of good and bad, or light and dark. Many centuries ago, these two sides met in a devastating battle, but because both sides were equally strong, the war led to a standoff with no clear winner in near sight. The elders of the two sides called for a truce, and it was decided that the days would be governed by the side of light and nights would be governed by the forces of dark. The Elder of Light resorted to setting up a police force of sorts called the Night Watch, whose task was to keep a check on the dark vampires from ravaging the city of Moscow. Many centuries later, an other named Anton joins the Night Watch, and he seeks to thwart a prophecy that foretells the birth of the most powerful other who would side with the dark forces, not just to end the stalemate, but also risk the balance of life on Earth. Director Timur Bekmambetov picked up every American story of a supernatural fight between the good and the bad vampires and gave it an all-Russian culture and theme. So although the film looks American, it feels Russian. This sort of cross-cultural theme makes it worthwhile and engaging. Furthermore, the line between good and evil has been blurred several times, and the viewer is often left with a choice and freedom to make their own judgments. Night Watch was supposed to be the first film of a trilogy, and we did get a sequel titled Day Watch in 2006, but a third film could never come to see the light of day because director Bekmambetov got busy with making the 2008 action thriller Wanted that starred Angelina Jolie, James McAvoy, and Morgan Freeman. Nevertheless, Night Watch will quench your thirst for some foreign vampire flick if you're in the mood for it. Number 21, Martin, 1978.
How old are you, Martin?
I'm old.
How old?
84.
Although Martin looks like a man in his early 20s, he claims that he is 84 years old and asked how he would tell you because he's a damn vampire. His modus operandi, however, is nothing like vampires. He drinks blood by mutilating his sedated victims. As fate would have it, Martin lands up in Pennsylvania to live with his cousin Christina and granduncle Tate Kuda. Tate is apprehensive of Martin and refers to him as the ancient vampire Nosferatu, while his cousin promises to save his soul. A few days after his arrival, Martin falls in love with a local woman, following which his temptations to drink human blood take a back seat. But the raging hormones fail to overpower his unquenched thirst for blood, and soon enough the withdrawal symptoms kicked in. As Martin went on a bloody rampage, what lays ahead was nobody's guess. George A. Romero was truly an expert at romanticizing the horror genre and using it as a social commentary, but a frightening one at that.
Die. Or I wish somebody would kill me. It's been a long time for me.
The film is a frightening tale in its own right, but watching it sends chills down the spine because it is never revealed if Martin really is a vampire or if his actions result from the troubled mind of a young man who is merely addicted to human blood. While the audience struggles to figure Martin's history and evolution, Romero throws captivating action and sequences to keep the film a true horror. Played by John Amplas, the character of Martin is particular and exclusive to a mind like Romero's, who also stars in the film as Father Howard. Even after 4 decades of its release, we are talking about it because it has all the ingredients to scare, traumatize, and send the viewers into deep thoughts about reality and myth. But the most disturbing and unsettling fact is that Martin makes you believe that a blood-drinking serial killer is not as far from reality as we might perceive it to be. I mean, it all comes down to a simple question. Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life?
Do not follow me anymore, or I will swallow you whole.
Number 22, Night Flyer, 1997. A cynical tabloid paparazzo, Richard Dees, works for a tabloid called Inside View. When his editor-in-chief, Merton Morrison, brings him the story of an unusual murder in an airfield, the corpse was found devoid of blood and seemed like the work of a vampire. Richard discards the story, and Merton appoints another journalist, Catherine Blair, to the case. As she started working on the story, more such murders started to surface around the airfield. By now, the story has become sensational enough for Richard to take an interest in it, and he competed with Catherine to get to the bottom of it. So much that at one point in time, he agrees to work alongside Catherine.
Now we get our asses to Wilmington. It's time to bag this prick. Go pack.
However, when her help is no longer needed, he abandons her and moves forward on his own. But unfortunately for Richard, fate plays a truly ugly and the most Stephen King-style trick with him. The film is based on Stephen King's short story of the same name. Yes, it is a vampire movie, but it is also a take on the blood-sucking paparazzi and media that hound for stories where there are none and sink their exploitive fangs deep into the stakeholders involved for personal and self-interests. Yet there's a hypocrisy involved in King's story and Mark Pavia's direction. While Night Flyer glorifies the exploitation of celebrities at the hands of reporters and media, they also enjoy bathing in the glory and fame that media brings their way. Nevertheless, the film is potent enough to give you jump scares as well as make you laugh, and hence it fits perfectly on this list. Number 23, Mr. Vampire 1985. If you have grown up watching or reading about Western vampires who dress in black leather clothes and have fanged teeth, then my friend, you are in for a real surprise in this film about a Chinese hopping vampire. Master Yam came to have the belief that if his father was exhumed from the grave and buried again, the ritual would bring prosperity to him and his family. So Master Yam hired a priest named Master Cao, who was skilled at controlling the likes of evil spirits and vampires. When Cao dug up Yam's father's grave, he was shocked to see that the corpse had developed blue fingers like that of a vampire. Cao then brought the undead corpse to his abode so that it could be studied, but Cao's students Choi and Sang, who were a little more than bumbling fools, managed to free the vampire out in the open. The vampire would begin its rampage and seek to kill everyone who was involved in awakening him. And by the way, this one is not the garden variety vampire. It hops to move around in the quest of claiming its victims. Director Ricky Lau's film is based on a prevalent practice from ancient China called jiangxi. In those days, when people would die far away from their native place, the dead would be transported in a macabre fashion. The corpses would be tied to a bamboo pole, and the two men would lift either end of the pole on their shoulders and walk. As you may imagine, while walking, the bamboo pole would continually flex and give the impression that the corpses were hopping. The hopping corpses were the primary inspiration behind Ricky Lau's film, and the result was a hilarious vampire. The film gained so much success that it saw 4 prompt sequels between 1986 and 1992. It's a garden fresh variety of vampire tales that's been left unsmoked by many of us. Watch it to believe it.
In the heart, David. In the heart.
Number 24, Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat, 1989. So you see, not all vampires are hell-bent on killing humans for blood. Some of them just get themselves a machine to make them nice warm pitchers of artificial human blood. Now that doesn't sound so bad, does it? But what happens when the machine stops working and the vampires feel hungry and thirsty? Well, they call the guy who made the machine for them. And what happens when that guy decides to take his family, i.e. his wife and 2 young daughters, along with himself to this land full of hungry vampires? You would find out that after watching this tale of vampires versus everyone else, including vampires. While a few vampires are the good guys, another vampire named Ethan Jefferson started to move his mates to bring about a revolution and resort to the old ways of killing humans and drinking fresh blood. And to add to the absurdity of the already complex situation, a young descendant of Van Helsing aims to butcher all vampires, good and bad. Let's call it the Vampire Civil War. Horror comedies are fun to watch, but if the plethora of ingredients are not put in the right amounts, any great director can successfully spoil the broth. Naturally, making a horror comedy becomes as difficult as any other film. Nevertheless, director Anthony Hickox did a great job at bringing to life some vampire cowboys who put sunscreen to save themselves from burning away and puts them in the middle of a civil war. The commendable thing about Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat, is that its humor is intelligent and on point. They just don't make them anymore. Bruce Campbell, who plays Robert Van Helsing, is a bumbling fool of a vampire hunter. Although known for its surplus humor, the film has an uplifting moral at its end. Something that would make even the hardest of you lost to go awe and leave you smiling as the credits roll up. Number 25, Let Me In, 2010.
Are you a vampire?
I need blood to live.
But how old are you?
I've been told for a very long time.
It is a remake of the 2008 Swedish film titled Let the Right One In. A 12-year-old Owen lives in Los Alamos of New Mexico, but life is not easy for him, being something of an outcast and a bullied little child. His classmates Kenny and 2 of his friends make Owen's life worse than miserable, and as is typical with bullied children, Owen doesn't confide in his mother with these issues and only dreams and imagines of avenging himself. But things change when he befriends a girl in his neighborhood of his age. Strangely enough, she appears only at night in the building's playground. I mean, what else does one expect from a vampire? As it happens, the vampire girl Abby's apparent father is a wanted serial killer who is known for draining the blood out of his victims' bodies so that Abby could drink it. Meanwhile, a cop is incessantly investigating the murders on suspicion that a satanic cult is committing them. What will Owen do when he learns that Abby is an ancient vampire? Will love overpower all notions of fear? When a film is remade, there are high chances that it would please neither the audience nor critics, simply because it lives and breathes under the sword of comparison. The film is beyond doubt a worthy remake of the Swedish film, but it sometimes feels better than the original due to the expertise that director Matt Reeves holds when it comes to making a horror film. He even included a high-octane action horror sequence right in the middle of the film, and we couldn't be happier. The elements of horror and fear are captivating, and at the same time, the chemistry between Cody Smith-McPhee and Chloe Grace Moritz playing Owen and Abby is engaging, and they give new meaning to this twisted love story of a young boy and an ancient vampiress. Is it dark? Is it sweet? It is both. Although the audience secretly wishes for the two lovebirds of the fairy tale to unite, there is an unsettling thought that prevails. Should they unite, what would become of Owen? Would he become Abby's new help, who kills people to get her blood? That's an unsettling thought that the film leaves you with. Happy watching! Number 26, Vampires, 1998. After losing his parents to vampires, Jack Crow pledged as a child to devote his life towards eradicating them from the face of the earth. Upon growing up, he joined a team of vampire slayers funded by the Vatican itself. Jack leads the team of these proficient and prolific vampire hunters who use coordinated attack tactics to get the bloodsuckers. They first slow the vampires using machine guns and then harpoon them into the daylight using mechanical winches. Jack's latest assignment is taking down a house full of vampires, and the mission goes successful. Later, while the rest of the team indulges in women and alcohol, Jack himself worries about the leader of vampires, Valak. His fears become a reality when the powerful Valak arrives and massacres the drunk vampire slayers. Jack soon learns from Cardinal Alba that Valak is after an ancient relic that would enhance his powers and grant him the ability to come out under sunlight. Now that cannot be good. With most of his men gone, how would Jack stop the merciless Valak? The film Vampires had a troubled production for several reasons. Director John Carpenter was considering retirement from filmmaking after a string of box office failures. When he finally agreed to take the directorial reins for Vampires, the executive cut down the budget of the film by 2/3. Carpenter then wrote an uncredited script for the film so that he could make do with whatever resources he had with him. But despite these initial hurdles, Carpenter delivered an intense, violent, crude, and exciting Western horror. What succeeds most for Carpenter is that he ensures that his protagonist and antagonist are equally powerful and charismatic, and no clear winner comes in sight until the time the film is ended. James Woods as John Crow and Thomas Ian Griffith as Jan Valak definitely steal the show, but credit must be given to the performance of Daniel Baldwin and Cheryl Lee. Vampires is a living proof that Carpenter can turn anything into gold by his touch, given that he has put his heart and mind into it. Many consider Vampires as the film which brought him back from the shadows and put him back on the map. Number 27, Daughters of Darkness, 1971. Stephen Chilton was born in a rich, aristocratic British family who grew up in America. He travels with his newlywed wife Valerie to Belgium, from where the couple hopes to take a ferry to Britain to meet with Stephen's mother. They stop at this magnificent but empty hotel on the Austin seafront. Interestingly, Stephen has a hidden streak of sadism in him, which comes to the fore whenever he hears about something violent. Valerie is an intelligent girl and wouldn't want to spend any more time than necessary with Stephen, but he constantly tells her that he would talk to his mother about her marriage, and she believes him. Things seem to be going well until a mysterious Hungarian countess named Elizabeth Bathory arrived at the hotel with her voluptuous secretary Alana. Soon, corpses of mutilated virgin girls start to surface around the hotel, and the needle of suspicion points towards Elizabeth Bathory, whose ancestor was none other than the infamous Countess Elizabeth Bathory de Exed, the Hungarian noblewoman and serial killer from the 16th century. If any of you have even a passing knowledge of who Bathory was, you'd know the grotesque and macabre deeds she performed in her castle. She is known to be one of the first serial killers, having sent more than hundreds of young girls to the afterlife in acts of sadism. It is well established that lesbian vampire films and psychosexual horror films were a hit back in the 70s. But if we had to choose one movie that set the bar for such film in the future and acted as a turning point, it has to be Harry Kumel's Daughter of Darkness. It's an artistically made, mesmerizing tale of lesbianism and vampirism that maintains a surreal and eerie atmosphere throughout its runtime. While the film itself has nothing to do with the real-life Elizabeth Bathory, her reference certainly gives the desired narrative to the film's story. Delphine Seyrig as Countess Elizabeth Bathory and Danielle Ouimet as Valerie Chilton have given exceptional performances. Even though the film's pace makes it lose its fangs, Daughters of Darkness does offer a sumptuous bite. Number 28, The Addiction, 1995. A philosophy student at New York University, Kathleen Conklin, gets attacked by a woman who calls herself Casanova. She bit Kathleen on her neck and drank her blood. Soon, Kathleen started experiencing symptoms typical to vampires, like aversion towards sunlight, dislike for normal food, and a thirst for human blood. Furthermore, she becomes extremely aggressive in nature and offers sex to men so that she could take them to deserted corners and drink their blood. But this rapid change in her demeanor soon caught the eyes of her cohort, Jean. However, Kathleen manages to convert several people during her life as a vampire.
Worse than I've done? I don't even know what you've done.
Where would she stop? Would she stop at all? The Addiction is one of the least compromising and most individualistic vampire films that the 90s probably produced. The director from The Big Apple, Abel Ferrara, knows his way around with the camera angles and used the black and white setup in his film to enhance its quality and fear factor. The film feels with no effort, powerful, and the transition of a philosophy student into a vampire couldn't be more fluid. But that's not even the best part about it. Ferrara's film is a dark and impactful satire on drug abuse and the theological aspect of sins and wrongdoings. As much as it is a vampire flick, it's a crude and detailed examination of several philosophical thoughts that are studied through the action of the film's characters.
Judy Glassberg.
Number 29, Rabid, 1977. Hart and his girlfriend Rose get into an accident in the countryside of Quebec. While Hart receives some physical injuries like a dislocated shoulder and a broken hand, Rose gets severely burned. At the Keloid Clinic, Dr. Dan Keloid performs a new and radical plastic surgery on Rose. Hart gets released a month later, but Rose continues to remain in a coma. Suddenly one day she wakes up from her coma, screaming and panicked. When a fellow patient named Lloyd Walsh tried to calm her down, she pierced his skin and held his right arm so tight that it suffered an injury. But strangely, Walsh couldn't remember what caused the injury.
For heaven's sake, what happened to you?
I can't remember anything.
Rose soon developed a phallic and clitoral-shaped organ under her armpit, which she started using to inject into people to draw their blood. One important aspect of her newfound appetite was that she only wanted human blood. She had once tried to extract the blood of a cow, but ended up puking. Furthermore, the people she injected her new organ into turned into zombie-like beings. It was as if she was spreading a plague of sorts. How will Rose stop? Much before David Cronenberg delivered us with one of the most epic movie monsters in the form of the Brundlefly, his earlier directorial efforts had started to show similar levels of gruesome but largely sophisticated body horror like that in his 1986 film The Fly. And the same could be said for his film Rabid, which was enough to creep you out and maybe even make you feel nauseated. As a unique take on vampirism and zombification, Cronenberg simply mixed both, but unlike other films, he gave vampirism a scientific backing. Another interesting aspect of Cronenberg's vampire Rose is that she attacks from an organ under her armpit instead of fangs. Rabid is a visual masterpiece that can horrify any layman and quench a gorehound's thirst for the nasty and grotesque, so don't forget to check it out. Number 30, Dark Shadows, 2012. In the year 1752, Joshua and Naomi Collins leave England with their young son Barnabas and come to America in the hopes of a better future. Their business flourishes so much that the town of Collinswood is created in the family's name. 2 decades later, Barnabas is practically the uncrowned prince of the town. He turns out to be a rich and powerful playboy of sorts, but everything shatters for him when he breaks the heart of a witch named Angelique Bouchard. This grave mistake cost him everything, and she gave him a fate worse than death. Angelique turned him into a vampire and had him burned alive.
Suffer my anguish alone in the dark.
However, 2 centuries later, Barnabas is unwittingly freed by 11 workers whose blood Barnabas drinks and returns to the world in the year 1972. It's a world far from different from what he remembered, but he goes to his family anyway. The descendants of the Cullen family have now become a bunch of dysfunctional people living together, and each of them has a dark secret to hide. In these troubled times, Barnabas the vampire decides to take control of things and save his family from eternal doom. Meanwhile, Angelique is still alive and hasn't forgotten Barnabas or the way he broke her heart. With the likes of Johnny Depp, Michelle Pfeiffer, Helena Bonham Carter, and Ava Green in the cast, director Tim Burton delivered a ghoulishly endearing film. It offers all things good without taking away the essence of comedy. While few critics and the American audience didn't appreciate the beauty of the film, it fared exceptionally well in Europe and other markets.
The people are calling sport in my worshippers now.
Burton managed to wrap the several characters and a complicated story into a cohesive whole that felt fresh during the time of its release. In the first decade of the 21st century, we had films like Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead, which explored the funny side of zombies, but vampires had taken a back seat. With Dark Shadows, the subgenre saw something of a revival, and that too in style. Even if these things don't please you, watch it for Johnny Depp's performance, which elevates to levels that cannot be oversimplified by calling it just funny. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
You like this? Oh. Do you like being food for the immortals? Do you like dying?